With regards to traditional risk management not having worked, and that we've been, and I think still are, largely speaking, at the wrong end of the pitch, I think that by and large, in typically good organisations, that the paperwork invariably is always right, but the practice invariably is fairly poor. I would say that when you evidence procedures, committees, reports, audits, ring binders, and all that good stuff, a typical good company is going to get 7 or 8 out of 10. However, when something abnormal and adverse happens, be it to a small company or a large company, a government department, big or small, what are you going to find? You're going to find that in about 3 to 5 column inches of a newspaper article, you're going to find out in 3 column inches or 5 column inches what happened, why it happened, what went wrong. And it won't be complex. It won't be complex. By and large, we will score companies in terms of the translation of good policy to poor practice. 7 or 8 out of 10 up here for policy, 3 or 4 out of 10 down here for very poor practice on the ground. Now you might say, Padder, that's a pretty big statement. We'd like you to stand it up. If we just reflect for a moment on the global financial crisis, you know, an awful lot of the tools and the systems and the models and the frameworks and all that kind of good stuff that we have today has come from cutting-edge financial services sector and the pharmaceutical sector, right? What do we now know today? We know that in the best-run companies, with the smartest people, the most sophisticated risk management systems, Harvard graduates, you name it, all the systems failed at the same time for very, very similar reasons, precipitating the disastrous consequences that we're all living with today. The systems that cost tens of millions to put in place in individual companies didn't work then. They weren't fit for purpose then. And they're just not fit for purpose today. I remember when I was working for about 3 years in the States, talking to a quants guy in a very, very large insurance conglomerate. And knew nothing at the time about subprime and things like that, or CDOs. But I said, look, you're assuming that property prices across the entirety of the US are going to continue to rise for the foreseeable future. He said, yeah, we are. I said, you're assuming that cheap credit on tap is going to continue being cheap and on tap for the foreseeable future. He said, yeah, we reckon so. I said, you're after saying earlier on, because we were in a bit of a process with them, I said, you've effectively de-risked risk. He says, we have effectively, yes. And I said, I'm just not too sure about that, because I think the independence rule somewhere along the line here is being sacrificed. What's the independence rule? If we take 1 million cars in Dublin City, that's a big number, and you take 20,000 accidents in any one year, an actuary can count up the individual car accidents and draw conclusions, assuming each individual car accident happens independent of the other. It's called the independence rule. And I reckoned that they had broken that rule. So the guy said to me, Padder, look, you just wouldn't get it. It's too complex and so forth and so on. I'll come back to that very point in a moment. When we respond to crisis events in corporates or organisations, be they government or just commercial organisations, we find there's always shock, always shock. However, when you peel back the layers of the onion, what do you find? Rarely ever surprise. Why? The thing that happened wasn't written down on paper, certainly will not be on the risk register. Why? It's too heavy for paper. But it sure as hell is whispered about.